Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move. This seat is reserved for our VIP passengers. That was the moment everything began to unravel. A simple flight turned into a national reckoning. What the flight crew didn't know was this. The man they tried to humiliate wasn't just any passenger. He was the one person who could destroy or completely transform the airline. This story isn't just about injustice. It's about karma, accountability, and how one calm decision changed an entire industry. The morning sun had barely crept over the skyline of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport when Dr. Nathan Carter stepped into the first-class cabin of Celester Airlines. At 42, Nathan was the embodiment of modern success, a self-made tech innovator, philanthropist, and CEO of Virtue Tech, a $2.8 billion company pioneering ethical AI and customer service. Tall, reserved, and sharply dressed in a navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, Nathan moved with quiet confidence. But confidence wasn't what the flight attendant saw when she looked at him. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice saccharine but firm. "There seems to be a mistake. We need you to move to accommodate our VIP passenger." The attendant's name was Jessica Nolan, and though her words were polite, her tone dripped with condescension. Behind her stood a woman impeccably dressed in a cream-colored designer pantsuit, tapping an expensive gold watch with theatrical impatience. Her name, Victoria Langford. "I always sit there," Victoria muttered under her breath, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "It's practically my seat." Nathan, now seated comfortably in 2A, the very front of the first-class cabin, looked up in confusion. He had booked early, paid in full, and checked in right on time. Most importantly, he was a Platinum Elite member of Celester Airlines. This wasn't just any seat. It was his seat. Reaching calmly into his wallet, Nathan produced his Platinum membership card and boarding pass. "I am a Platinum Elite member," he said in a level voice, "and this is my assigned seat." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Jessica's face, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I understand, sir," she said, straightening her posture, "but this particular seat is usually reserved for our frequent high-tier travelers, such as Ms. Langford here. She's one of our long-standing patrons." Translation: "You may have the status, but you don't belong here." A few rows back, a phone camera lit up, another across the aisle. Passengers began to whisper. The quiet crackle of tension sparked in the cabin. What the crew didn't realize was this. Their actions were being documented in real time, and within hours the world would be watching. The man they underestimated to them, he was just another man in a first-class seat they felt he didn't deserve. But Nathan Carter wasn't just another man. He was the architect of Virtue Tech Solutions, a company whose mission was to help corporations eliminate implicit bias through AI-driven training tools. Ironically, the very kind of systemic bias unfolding before his eyes was something his software was built to identify and prevent. Nathan's journey hadn't been paved with privilege. Raised in the rough streets of East Detroit, he taught himself to code at the age of 11, using a battered second-hand laptop he found at a thrift store. While other kids played games, Nathan reverse-engineered them. By 14, he was designing security software. By 16, he was building algorithms, and by 22, he had started Virtue Tech in a one-bedroom apartment while delivering groceries to cover rent. When Nathan was 17, he lost his father in a shooting that shook his entire neighborhood. Standing at the gravesite, he made a silent promise. "I'll build something that makes people see each other differently." 2 decades later, that promise was still the fire behind everything he did. Morning at the airport. Earlier that morning, before the flight, security cameras captured Nathan helping an elderly woman struggling with her suitcase. He walked with her all the way to gate B12, ensuring she found the right departure screen. He held doors open for airport staff, thanked every barista and janitor by name, and tipped generously at the cafe. Not for attention, but because that's simply who he was. Now, seated in 2A, Nathan had carefully chosen this spot for its extra legroom. crucial for preparing the keynote presentation he was scheduled to deliver at the Global Tech and Ethics Summit in San Francisco. And he'd chosen Celestar Airlines for its reputation: polished luxury, full recline beds, gourmet service, and exclusivity. But beneath the glamour, Celestar had a problem: outdated systems, declining service ratings, and now a desperate pursuit of a new tech partner to modernize their operations. Guess which company they were courting for that $50 million contract? Virtue Tech. And guess who was quietly buying shares of the airline with plans to transform it from the inside? Nathan Carter. The flight attendant's motivation. Jessica Nolan wasn't new to first class. With nearly 10 years at Celestar, she prided herself on knowing her regulars. And no one was more regular than Victoria Langford, a wealthy art broker from Manhattan who tipped generously after every flight. Jessica had mortgage payments and was used to Victoria's $100 handshakes. "Sir," Jessica said again, leaning toward Nathan, "we have a passenger who always sits in this specific seat. Would you be willing to move to another first-class row? It would really help." Nathan raised his eyes. He held up his boarding pass. "This is my assigned seat. I'm also a Platinum Elite member," he replied, his voice measured but resolute. Victoria huffed audibly in the aisle. "I take this route twice a month. I always sit there," she said. "It's practically mine." Her voice wasn't angry, it was entitled, and people were listening. Passengers began shifting in their seats. A man across the row angled his phone slightly toward the scene. A woman near the window shook her head. The energy in the cabin shifted from quiet tension to sharp discomfort. The bribe. What happened next was discreet, but caught on camera by a passenger seated across the aisle. Victoria moved forward as if to place her handbag in the overhead bin, but in one swift, practiced motion, she slipped a folded bill into Jessica's pocket. A practiced whisper followed. "Thank you for helping with this little situation." Jessica's cheeks flushed. The entire exchange, the money, the whisper, the glance, was captured in full HD. Suddenly, this wasn't just about seating anymore. It was about bribery. It was about discrimination. It was about to become a story no one would forget. "Sir," Jessica said again, leaning toward Nathan, "we have a passenger who always sits in this specific seat. Would you be willing to move to another first-class row? It would really help." Nathan raised his eyes. He held up his boarding pass. "This is my assigned seat. I'm also a Platinum Elite member," he replied, his voice measured but resolute. Victoria huffed audibly in the aisle. "I take this route twice a month. I always sit there," she said. "It's practically mine." Her voice wasn't angry. It was entitled, and people were listening. Passengers began shifting in their seats. A man across the row angled his phone slightly toward the scene. A woman near the window shook her head. The energy in the cabin shifted from quiet tension to sharp discomfort. The bribe. What happened next was discreet, but caught on camera by a passenger seated across the aisle. Victoria moved forward as if to place her handbag in the overhead bin. But in one swift, practiced motion, she slipped a folded bill into Jessica's pocket. A practiced whisper followed. "Thank you for helping with this little situation." Jessica's cheeks flushed. The entire exchange, the money, the whisper, the glance, was captured in full HD. Suddenly, this wasn't just about seating anymore. It was about bribery. It was about discrimination. It was about to become a story no one would forget. The quiet tension in the cabin had turned electric. Every eye was now locked on row 2, seat A. Victoria Langford, her lips pursed in irritation, remained standing in the aisle, arms crossed and glaring at Nathan Carter, as if the seat belonged to her by divine right. Jessica Nolan, the flight attendant, shifted nervously, caught between pressure from a high-tipping passenger and the rules she knew she was bending. And just when things seemed to plateau, a new figure entered the picture. Trevor Baines, the cabin supervisor, strode down the aisle with the air of authority that suggested he'd never been challenged before. Clean cut, late 30s, and dressed immaculately in the Navy uniform of Celeste's leadership team, he approached Nathan like a man ready to squash a problem rather than solve it. "Sir," Trevor said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "we need you to move to accommodate one of our VIP travelers." The word accommodate hung heavy in the air, a thin veil for what was truly being asked. Give up your seat quietly and know your place. Nathan looked up from his tablet, his expression calm but focused. "I've shown my boarding pass and my Platinum Elite status. This is my assigned seat." Trevor's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed near his temple. "Perhaps you're unfamiliar with how things work on this airline," he said, voice dripping with false patience. "We accommodate customers with loyalty and specific preferences." Nathan didn't flinch. "You mean customers who look a certain way?" he asked, his tone still calm, but now with an edge. The passengers heard that. Whispers, raised eyebrows. Another phone began recording. Trevor leaned closer, his voice dropping just enough to seem threatening. "We can do this the easy way," he said. "Or we can make this difficult. Your choice." Nathan blinked slowly. Then he responded. Not with a shout, not with rage, but with simple, unwavering conviction. "I'm not moving." 6 words. 6 words that shifted the power dynamic completely. Trevor's face flushed crimson. This wasn't supposed to happen. Passengers didn't push back, especially not passengers like him. Without another word, Trevor turned and briskly walked to the front of the cabin, picking up the service phone with sharp, agitated movements. Though his back was turned, the tension in his shoulders made it clear. He was about to escalate. Minutes later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Gregory Hale emerged, tall, silver-haired, and exuding authority born from 30 years in the air. He was followed closely by Jessica and Trevor, both stiff with anticipation. Captain Hale stopped beside Nathan's seat, towering over the calm man in the leather recliner. "Sir," the captain began, his voice firm but not yet aggressive. "I understand there's a..." The terminal was quiet when Nathan Carter was escorted into a side area by airport security. There were no angry outbursts, no raised voices, no resistance. Just a quiet, calm man collecting his thoughts after being publicly humiliated for doing nothing more than sitting in the seat he rightfully paid for. To the staff of Celeste Airlines, he was just a man who didn't look like he belonged in first class. But what they didn't know, what they never even thought to ask, was that Nathan Carter didn't just belong in first class. He owned the future of their airline. Nathan's phone buzzed in his palm. A message from Elise Thompson, Virtutech's COO. "Saw the video, already trending. Legal team is assembling now. Where do you want to meet?" Nathan texted back, "Private lounge. Gate 43, 30 minutes. He sat down, opened his laptop, and began compiling documentation. Footage, witness statements, audio logs, every word, every glance, every moment that had taken place aboard that aircraft. Within minutes, Emily Zhang, the marketing executive who had followed him off the plane, arrived, slightly out of breath. "I sent you the video," she said. "There's no editing, it's all there. I also grabbed screenshots of the moment that woman, Victoria, put money in the supervisor's pocket." Nathan looked at her, sincere appreciation in his eyes. "You didn't have to do any of that, but thank you. What you did matters." She hesitated. "It's not just about you, it's about all of us. What happened today? It's not new. It just finally happened in front of people with phones and a conscience." Back on the plane. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere had shifted. Completely. Victoria Langford was now reclining in seat 2A, sipping champagne. Her face bore the smug satisfaction of someone who believed she'd won. Jessica Nolan handed her a hot towel and leaned in politely. "We're so sorry for the disruption, Miss Langford. We'll make sure the rest of your flight is perfect." "Thank you, Jessica," Victoria replied sweetly. "Some people just don't understand how things work." Out of sight in the galley, Jessica and Trevor huddled briefly. Trevor discreetly pulled out the folded bills, 2 crisp $100 bills. He smirked as he slipped them into his wallet. "Nice bonus today," he murmured. Jessica hesitated, glancing back toward the aisle. "That man wasn't just any passenger," she said. Trevor scoffed. "He was causing a problem. You saw how he got." "No," Jessica whispered. "He didn't get angry. He never raised his voice. He just refused to move." Trevor didn't answer, but deep down, even "I agree," Elise nodded. "Let's force an emergency shareholder meeting. You're the largest individual stakeholder. Call it demand accountability." Nathan looked at the screen showing the stock plunge in real time. "I'm not doing this to destroy them," he said, "but I will demand that they confront what they've allowed to fester. And I won't let this happen to someone who can't fight back." He tapped a few keys, then hit send. The emergency meeting request was officially filed. Meanwhile, at Celestar HQ, the mood inside corporate was near panic. "I want to speak with Dr. Carter directly," CEO Williams said, picking up the phone. His assistant handed him the number. Nathan answered after 2 rings. "Mr. Carter, this is Richard Williams. I want to extend a personal and sincere apology for—" Nathan interrupted calmly. "Your apology is noted, but I've filed for an emergency shareholder meeting. Your crew's actions and your company's culture require immediate attention." Williams' voice faltered. "Perhaps we could—" "It's not negotiable." The call ended. The emergency meeting board members rushed in from across the country. Some in golf attire, others still in suits from earlier engagements. The mood was dire. When Nathan entered the boardroom, everyone stood instinctively. He said nothing, just nodded, and took his seat at the head of the table. Williams stood and cleared his throat. "We'd like to begin by expressing our—" "I'm not here for apologies," Nathan said sharply. "I'm here for accountability." He tapped the remote. The screen lit up. The video played. Every moment, the refusal, the whisper, the bribe, the threat, the removal. When it ended, no one said a word. Nathan stood. "As your largest individual shareholder, I'm making 2 demands," he said, voice steady. "First, immediate termination of all staff involved. Second, cancellation of all negotiations with Virtutech until your culture proves it's worth partnering with." "You'd walk away from a $50 million deal?" one board member asked. Nathan turned to him. "I'd walk away from a $1 billion lie." Consequences ignite. Within 12 hours, Jessica, Trevor, and Captain Gregory Hale were fired. A formal HR panel showed the footage again, including the moment Victoria gave Trevor money. Jessica broke down in tears. "I knew it was wrong, but I didn't stop it." Trevor didn't speak. He just stared at the table. Captain Hale tried to defend himself. "I trusted their judgment." The HR director was firm. "You trusted the wrong thing. That choice cost you your career." Celestar grounds flights for 48 hours. A company-wide memo was issued. All flights suspended for 48 hours for mandatory ethics and anti-bias training. Every staff member, from pilots to gate agents, was ordered to report for immersive retraining built from Virtutech's simulation programs. "We failed a passenger," Williams said in a company-wide address. "And more than that, we failed our principles." Nathan addressed the staff, standing before a room of 300 employees. "This isn't about me," he said. "This is about the people who don't have cameras, who get moved, dismissed, or judged every day. This is our chance to change that." The world watches Celestar's unprecedented shutdown became global news. For the first time in aviation history, an airline halted operations not due to safety, but to confront its own discrimination. In the days that followed, Nathan received thousands of letters from passengers, employees, even former airline staff from other companies, all thanking him for standing his ground. But perhaps the most surprising note came from Victoria Langford. A single sentence sent anonymously through legal channels. "I was wrong. The sun hadn't even risen when Jessica Nolan found herself awake, staring at the ceiling in the small apartment she shared with her sister. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Notifications, messages, calls from unknown numbers. But none of them mattered anymore. She had been fired. Publicly. Her face and name were now circulating across news sites, blogs, and every corner of social media. Her 8 years as a flight attendant had evaporated in a 90-second clip. A moment of silence, a smile too tight, a bribe accepted without protest. The internet didn't just remember, it punished. She had failed. Not just herself, but everyone who had ever trusted her to stand for what was right. 3 miles across the city, Trevor Bain stared at his own reflection in the window of his condo. His uniform, now folded neatly on the bed behind him, would never be worn again. He had told himself he was just following protocol, that he was enforcing the system. But that wasn't true, was it? Trevor had seen Nathan's eyes, calm, dignified, unwavering, and he'd tried to break that calm, because it made him uncomfortable, because it challenged the assumptions he had never thought to question. "I wasn't biased," he whispered to no one. "I was just doing my job." But the lie felt empty now, and high above the tarmac, in a corner of Celester Airlines headquarters, Captain Gregory Hale sat alone in the flight debriefing room. His captain's wings still pinned to his blazer, but the weight of them now unbearable. 30 years in the air, over 15,000 flight hours, and all of it undone by one decision: to stay silent, to let others lead, to not ask questions when it mattered most. He had prided himself on professionalism, on neutrality, but neutrality, he realized, could be a weapon too, when used in the face of injustice. "I trusted the wrong people," he muttered, "and now I've lost everything." A message from the unexpected. Later that afternoon, all three received the same email. It was brief, director, and shocking. From Elise Thompson. Subject: Virtue Tech, invitation to Second Chance program. Message: you've been identified as eligible for Virtue Tech's pilot rehabilitation program, the Second Chance Initiative. Dr. Nathan Carter has requested that you be given the opportunity to participate. This program is voluntary. It is rigorous. It is not about saving reputations. It's about rebuilding values. If you're ready to face the truth and do the work, we'll see you Monday. If not, no response is necessary. Trevor stared at the message for a long time. Then he closed his laptop. He didn't respond. Yet. The Second Chance program begins on Monday morning in an unmarked building near downtown Seattle. A group of 9 individuals gathered around a large U-shaped conference table. Among them, Jessica, Trevor, and Captain Hale. Nathan wasn't there, not yet. Instead, they were greeted by Sasha Ford, head of communications at Virtue Tech. "This isn't a lecture," she said plainly. "This is a mirror. You'll see yourselves clearly in here. Some of it will hurt." The program was unlike anything any of them expected. They weren't just talked at, and they were immersed. Placed inside full sensory simulations using Virtue Tech's cutting-edge behavioral AI. Scenarios that mirrored the very decisions they had made, but flipped. Jessica found herself in a virtual airport, but this time, she was the woman being told she didn't belong. Passengers whispered. Staff stared. She felt herself shrink. Trevor was placed in the role of a middle-aged black man being interrogated by security for trying to use a business lounge, despite showing valid credentials. Captain Hale sat in a cockpit, but instead of flying the plane, he had to choose whether to intervene when his first officer began mocking a disabled passenger boarding late. Each scenario ended with a simple, brutal question. What did you do? The moment it clicked on. Day 3, Nathan arrived. He entered the training room in silence. No suit, no assistant, just a gray sweater, dark jeans, and eyes that had seen too much and still stayed open. Trevor tensed. Jessica couldn't meet his gaze. The captain stood but said nothing. Nathan sat at the head of the table and looked at each of them, one by one. I didn't want revenge, he said. I wanted reflection. Silence. You didn't just remove me from a seat, he continued. You removed the idea that someone like me could belong in that seat. And that's not just about race. It's about power, perception, worth. Jessica wiped a tear. I was afraid to challenge Victoria. I thought I'd lose my job if I said no. You lost your job anyway, Nathan said gently. But now you can reclaim your voice. Trevor finally spoke. I always thought I was one of the good ones. I didn't use slurs. I didn't hate anyone. I followed the rules. No, Nathan replied. You followed the culture, but the culture was broken. The seeds of change. Over the next 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. The room softened. Captain Hale began taking notes, pages and pages of them. He started each session with an apology, even if it wasn't required. Jessica started asking questions, hard ones, about accountability, about courage, about why silence always seemed easier than speaking up. Trevor, once the most defensive, became the most engaged. He stayed after each session reviewing modules, asking for more resources, even volunteering for beta testing new training AI. I don't want to be the guy from that video, he said one day. I want to be the guy who owned it and changed. Celestar transforms. While the Second Chance program unfolded quietly, Celestar Airlines was undergoing a visible, industry-defining transformation. A 48-hour grounding had given way to a complete overhaul. Bias training became mandatory, not just a video, but immersive, personalized, AI-driven learning. A whistleblower protection program was established, offering bonuses to employees who reported discrimination. First-class seating policies were rewritten. Preferences no longer trumped paid seat assignments. All gratuity acceptance from passengers was banned. Passenger satisfaction rose. So did employee morale. And then something remarkable happened. Passenger diversity increased by 18% in 3 months. People began to trust Celestar again. Full circle. The final day. The final day of the Second Chance program wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning. Nathan returned with folders, each one containing the performance assessments, simulations. The dust had barely settled from the Celestar scandal when Nathan Carter found himself at the center of something much larger than a viral video. For weeks he had remained quiet, intentionally. No press tours, no media circuits, no attention-seeking. But behind the scenes, something powerful had been set in motion. Nathan knew that what happened on that plane wasn't isolated. The messages he received, thousands of them, painted a broader truth. Nurses turned away from lounges. Students accused of fraud at check-in. Business travelers asked to prove they belonged in first class. He realized something. This wasn't about Celestar anymore. It was about every institution that still saw inclusion as optional, not essential. The pitch that changed everything. 2 weeks after the Celestar board meeting, Nathan sat across from his executive team at Virtutech's downtown Seattle HQ. The room was buzzing. Screens glowed with social sentiment graphs, stock recovery metrics, and internal memos from airlines across the country. Most of them asking one question. How do we make sure this never happens to us? Elise Thompson, Virtutech's COO, leaned forward. We've got 12 major carriers requesting consultations. 5 want full integration of our anti-bias simulation suite. Nathan tapped his pen on the desk. They don't want to change. They want to protect themselves. Michael, their legal counsel, nodded. Which gives us leverage. Real leverage. Nathan stood and walked to the whiteboard. Then maybe it's time we stop consulting, he said. Maybe it's time we start leading. He uncapped a marker and wrote 3 words in bold. Equal Skies Initiative. The Equal Skies Launch Equal Skies wasn't just another tech product. It was a framework, a standard, a declaration. Built by Virtutech's AI engineers, behavioral scientists, and inclusion experts, Equal Skies combined real-time bias detection algorithms with immersive crew training, passenger protection tools, and cultural audits. It didn't just help companies identify discrimination, it restructured the systems that allowed it to persist. And it came with a bold challenge. Airlines that adopt Equal Skies will earn our public equity certified badge, visible on every website, ticket, boarding pass, and gate sign. Those that don't will publish that too. Within 48 hours of launch, the program's homepage had over 4 million unique visits. CNN, Forbes, NPR, and even late-night shows picked up the story. Public pressure surged. Passengers tweeted photos of their flights demanding to know, "Is my airline Equal Skies certified?" The first to sign. The first airline to adopt the full Equal Skies certification? Orion Jet, a mid-size West Coast carrier with a reputation for progressive policies but aging infrastructure. Their CEO, Marla Jennings, didn't hesitate. "We know we're not perfect," she said at the press conference, "but change doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with commitment." Within 30 days, OrionJet had implemented bias-responsive scheduling, removing unconscious patterns in crew assignments, passenger empathy modules in VR, where flight staff experience scenarios as people from different ethnic, cultural, and ability backgrounds. A real-time reporting tool in their app that allowed passengers to discreetly log discriminatory treatment. The result? A 29% spike in customer satisfaction and a 40% increase in minority bookings. Other airlines took notice. Going global. It didn't stop at airlines. Rail companies, cruise lines, hospitality chains, even conference organizers began inquiring about integrating Equal Skies standards into their operations. In less than 90 days, what began as a personal moment of injustice had become a global model for equity. Nathan found himself addressing global audiences, not as a victim, not even just as a CEO, but as a visionary. At the UN Global Equity Forum, he delivered a keynote that stunned attendees into silence. "We used to measure success by profit margins. But what if we measured it by dignity? What if the worth of a company was defined by how well it protected the invisible passengers, the ones you never see unless you're looking?" That line, "invisible passengers," trended on every social platform. A letter that changed the tone. One morning, weeks after the scandal had faded from daily headlines, Nathan received a handwritten letter at VirtuTech HQ. It was from Victoria Langford. It read, "I've lived my life assuming the world bent for me because I earned it. But now I know. I never saw who it bent against. I was wrong. Deeply, shamefully. I don't ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm changing, and for what it's worth. Thank you for showing me a better mirror." Nathan read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it in his drawer. He never spoke publicly about it. He didn't have to. The foundation is laid. 6 months after the incident, Equal Skies had expanded into 12 countries, translated into 17 languages, and adopted by over 70 companies across travel, tech, and public service industries. But Nathan had one more move to make. He returned to Celester Airlines not as a critic, not as a shareholder, but as a partner. With the toxic culture dismantled and rebuilt from within, with new leadership at the helm, Nathan and VirtuTech formed a long-term partnership with Celestar to make them the global flagship of ethical air travel. And it wasn't just symbolic. Every plane was equipped with an Equal Skies training terminal for crews. Every gate agent received monthly feedback loops. Every complaint was tracked with zero retaliation guarantees. The real shift. But the most meaningful change? It happened in moments no one recorded. A flight attendant pausing before asking a passenger to switch seats, and choosing empathy first. A manager reviewing hiring data and catching a pattern before it became a problem. A passenger like Nathan, not being treated like an exception, but as equal. Final scene. A new gate 1 year later. Nathan sat quietly at gate 18 waiting for a flight to Chicago. He wasn't flying private, He wasn't attending a summit. He was going to speak at his old high school, home to kids like he used to be. Kids who didn't always feel seen. Across the terminal, a gate agent called his name. "Mr. Carter, we've upgraded you to seat 2A, sir." He smiled, remembering. "Thank you," he said, "but I'll stay where I am today." The agent blinked. "Are you sure?" "You're eligible." Nathan nodded. "Yes, but so is the woman already sitting there." He looked toward the window, the reflection of his younger self faintly visible in the glass. Sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes when the seat you paid for is respected, and sometimes the best view from first class is knowing you don't need to sit there anymore to feel your worth. Nathan Carter could have disappeared. He had every reason to walk away from it all, now from the cameras, the praise, the trauma, and even the uncomfortable praise that followed. He had already made his point. He had already sparked a nationwide movement. The public hailed him a hero, but Nathan wasn't looking for heroism. He was looking for lasting change. And he knew change wasn't something you demanded. It was something you demonstrated every single day. A different kind of morning. Every morning for 6 weeks, Nathan woke up before sunrise, grabbed a black notebook, and went on a quiet walk through Seattle's Beacon Hill neighborhood, the same area where he used to live as a college student. He would sit on the same park bench overlooking the skyline, a simple thermos of coffee beside him, and write down 3 questions. Who did I help yesterday? What did I learn? What can I do better today? These weren't for branding. They weren't for social media. They were for him. Because amidst the noise and spotlight, Nathan understood something most people missed. Leadership is quiet before it's loud. It begins when no one is watching. Rebuilding, person by person. While VirtuTech and the Equal Skies initiative continued to expand globally, Nathan shifted his personal attention to one unexpected area: mentorship. He launched a private mentorship circle called the 2A Project, named after the seat he refused to surrender. But this project wasn't about seating. It was about standing for something bigger. Every month he gathered a small group of individuals who had experienced injustice. Not just racial bias, but classism, gender discrimination, ableism. And each session was built not around venting, but around transformation. How do we convert pain into purpose, he would ask. How do we become the people we needed when it happened to us? For some, it was their first time speaking about what they had endured. For others, it was the first time someone truly listened. The ones who got a second chance. Meanwhile, across town, a quiet miracle was unfolding. Jessica Nolan, once vilified online as the face of polite complicity, had not only completed the Second Chance program, but become its most vocal ambassador. She now worked with a nonprofit advocating for ethical workforce training in the hospitality industry. In one of their monthly follow-up circles, she shared something that stunned the group. "I used to think kindness was enough," she said, "that smiling and doing your job meant you were a good person. But kindness without courage is just comfort. And I let my comfort cost someone else their dignity." Trevor Baines, who had initially joined VirtuTech's ground services team at a regional carrier, had risen quickly, not by ambition, but by accountability. He now oversaw diversity integration in operations, and had helped 2 other employees avoid repeating the mistake he once made. And Captain Gregory Hale, though retired from commercial flying, had written a groundbreaking white paper titled Leadership at 30,000 Feet, Ethics in the Air. It became required reading at 3 aviation academies. The Flight That Brought It All. Full circle. 1 year after the incident, Nathan was invited to speak at the International Aviation Leadership Summit in Zurich. He boarded a flight out of JFK, Celester Airlines. It was the first time he had flown with them since the scandal. As he entered the cabin, the crew, all new faces, greeted him warmly. "Welcome aboard, Doctor." "Carter, we're honored to have you flying with us." He smiled, thanked them, and took his assigned seat. 3C. Across the aisle, a young man, maybe 24, glanced over. "You're Nathan Carter, right?" he asked wide-eyed. Nathan nodded. The young man leaned in. I'm in my first year at Virtutech's training division. I just want to say thank you. I got this opportunity because of the doors you opened. Nathan extended his hand. Number. You got this opportunity because you walked through it. The young man grinned. Still, thanks for refusing to move. A seat for everyone at the summit, Nathan delivered one of his most personal speeches yet. He didn't use slides, no videos, just a simple stool, a mic, and a story. He told them about that day, about the flight, about the silence, about the shame, about the choice. Then he paused, looked across the auditorium of CEOs, engineers, regulators, and students, and said, "This story isn't about a man in a seat. It's about whether we see value before we see status. Dignity before dollars. Humanity before hierarchy." He stepped forward. And when we get that right, when we start asking who deserves a seat instead of who's allowed to sit there, that quiet impact. Weeks later, Nathan received a package at Virtutech HQ. It wasn't from an airline or a corporation. It was from a retired school teacher in Kansas named Eleanor Marks. Inside was a note. I teach kids from every background. After your story, I stopped assigning seats based on test scores. I now let them choose where they sit based on how they feel most focused and seen. One of my shyest students now sits in the front row every day. He started raising his hand. Sometimes the smallest seat change can give a child the confidence to use their voice. Beneath the letter was a hand-drawn card, crayons, a stick figure, and 4 words. Thank you for standing. Closing reflection, the true growth. Nathan Carter didn't grow because he stood up for himself. He grew because after doing so, he built bridges for others to stand with him. He turned humiliation into innovation, silence into structure, pain into platform, and power into purpose. His greatest impact didn't come from what happened to him. It came from what he chose to do next. It began with a seat. A seat one man paid for, reserved, earned. A seat others decided he didn't deserve. But it never ended there. Because what happened to Dr. Nathan Carter on Flight 227 wasn't about leather upholstery, airline policy, or even the champagne in first class. It was about how quickly society still asks some people to justify their presence, while others are simply assumed to belong. A story retold. Again and again. 1 year after the Equal Skies initiative launched, the story of Nathan's refusal to move had become more than viral. It had become curriculum. High schools in 23 states used it in ethics and civics classes. MBA programs broke it down in leadership lectures. Police academies and customer service institutes analyzed the footage in bias training simulations. The viral clip, once just fuel for headlines, was now a case study in cultural awakening. And Nathan? He rarely spoke about the moment anymore because he didn't need to. The moment was no longer his alone. It now belonged to millions who saw their own story reflected in his calm defiance. A seat at the table. At the World Leadership Symposium in Geneva, Nathan Carter was honored with the Human Dignity Medal, awarded to those who advance civil equity through innovation, not outrage. As he accepted the award, he began his speech with a single sentence. I was never trying to go viral, I was just trying to go home. The room fell still. Then he added, when they told me to move, they didn't just want the seat. They wanted me to accept the message behind the request, that I was only welcome until someone more familiar showed up, that my presence was conditional. But I said no, not in anger, not in hate. I said no, so the next person wouldn't have to. Stories that came full circle. After the speech, an older woman approached Nathan backstage. She looked nervous, clutched a worn purse. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said softly, but I think you helped my son. Nathan tilted his head. She pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, a small local article about a teenager named Darius, who had once been wrongfully escorted off a school bus and nearly expelled for disruptive behavior, after refusing to give up a seat he'd already claimed. But when the school reviewed their anti-bias policy, inspired by Virtue Tech's Equal Skies standard, they reversed their decision and issued an apology. "My son never had anyone defend him," she said, her voice cracking. "But because of what you did, he now believes his voice matters." Nathan took the clipping with both hands and nodded. "That's why we do this," he said. "Not to go viral, but to go forward." From viral to visionary. In the year following the Celester incident, over 90 airlines, transit systems, and travel agencies adopted the Equal Skies certification. Nathan smiled, nodded, and made his way to seat 12A. Economy. Window seat. Just how he liked it now. Final reflection, the legacy. Nathan never needed the spotlight. He didn't need revenge. He didn't even need vindication. What he needed, what he built, was something far rarer. A world that listened. Not because he shouted, but because he stood. Not because he fought back, but because he stood still when it would have been easier to surrender. Not because he was powerful, but because he chose to empower others. It started with a seat and became a movement, a mirror, a message. That dignity isn't something you're given. It's something you carry. And no one, no uniform, no status, no assumption, has the right to take it away. Life lesson. The greatest lessons in life don't always come with fanfare. Sometimes they arrive in moments of silence and when you're asked to move, to be smaller, to disappear quietly for the comfort of someone louder or more familiar. But Nathan Carter's story teaches us that dignity isn't granted by class, color, or cost. It's anchored in self-respect. And when that self-respect is threatened, your calm refusal to shrink may become someone else's permission to stand. Real leadership isn't just about title or influence. It's about choosing integrity when no one expects you to. And doing so not for applause, but because it's right. Because sometimes, by refusing to move, you help an entire system finally start shifting. Real-life application. You don't have to be a CEO to make change. You can be a teacher who refuses to let seating charts reflect favoritism, a manager who questions biased hiring practices, a traveler who speaks up when someone is mistreated, even if it's uncomfortable, a customer who leaves feedback, not just complaints, a friend who listens before defending. Small decisions repeated often build culture. And culture, whether in a classroom, a company, or a country, starts with someone choosing to stay seated in their truth. So the next time you're faced with a moment that feels unfair or unjust, remember, you're not just choosing for yourself. You might be choosing for everyone after you.